welcome to the show. You were one-on-one with Wes the Sports Guy here on YouTube and online all the time at westhesportsguy.com. Make sure you bookmark that site, westhesportsguy.com, for all the social media links, the podcast link, YouTube as well. It's all linked for you at westhesportsguy.com. Subscribe, hit that bell to get notified when all the videos are posted here on this YouTube channel, and continue to use the hashtag to participate in the weekly conversation by using one-on-one Wes and hashtag sports is coming back. As I teased it on Instagram, this week's episode will be my review of The Last Dance. Now, this is going to be a very long and not as detailed episode as you might think it is, but basically it's going to be me talking about all 10 episodes, so there might be some spoilers in there for you, but if you, like myself, lived through the Michael Jordan era of the 1990s specifically, not so much in the 80s from what I remember of Michael Jordan, but definitely his heyday, his prime in the 1990s, that is what I'll be focusing on a lot, which is just a bullet point breakdown of each episode. But if you haven't seen it yet, I do recommend it. It is definitely a worthwhile watch. If you have not seen Michael Jordan play in his prime, if you only remember the days when he played for the Washington Wizards those 2 years, I choose to forget those 2 years. But nonetheless, if you only remember Jordan in that era, this is a very good, very detailed 10-episode documentary about Michael Jordan and his playing days with the Chicago Bulls, and also a brief period of when he was playing at the University of North Carolina, his upbringing, and all that good stuff, and so forth. But diving right into it, just a bullet point breakdown into episode 1 of The Last Dance. It starts out with a very testy relationship, and really history, you could say, between Phil Jackson, the head coach of the Chicago Bulls at that time, from late 1989, going into the 90s, all the way up until 1988. Jerry Krause, the general manager of the Chicago Bulls, also had a very contentious relationship, not just with Phil Jackson, but practically everybody, except for maybe the owner, Jerry Reinsdorf, of the Chicago Bulls. But it sets it up that way, where Jerry Krause is the villain. And I must say, I never really cared for Jerry Krause. I know there's a quote attributed to him that says basically to the effect that his belief was that organizations win championships, that players don't, I butchered it obviously, but players don't win championships, organizations do. Now, the quote obviously was a bit misquoted, taken out of context, as you will, because there's a sentence just after that basically says he's not just only saying that the organizations are partly, getting the credit for it when it comes to the general manager and the ownership, of course, but players do as well. He admits that. And it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek there, but there's some contention between Jerry Krause and the rest of the team throughout this documentary, but it sets it up that way to start. And then, of course, you have in the beginning of the episode where Michael Jordan gets drafted by the Chicago Bulls, and everything just starts to essentially transpire into what it eventually will set itself up to be as Michael Jordan being the greatest basketball player of all time. And there's no doubt about that. There's not many players that I've seen that are better than Michael Jordan or even can get up to the standard of what Michael Jordan is and what he was, especially in those days, being with the Chicago Bulls. Episode 2 then starts to kind of go in a little bit of a different direction, where they focus on one particular player that gets added to the championship formula of the Chicago Bulls with Michael Jordan at the helm, and that is going to be focusing on Scottie Pippen in episode 2, where he arrives to the Bulls via a draft day trade from the Seattle Supersonics. It shows Pippen's college days, his high school days in Arkansas, and also dives into the underpaid contract that Scottie Pippen had throughout pretty much his entire career as a member of the Chicago Bulls. It was very low valued contract in total. I think it was less than $20 million for a 7 or 8 year contract that he got with the Chicago Bulls. Obviously grossly undervalued when you look at it in terms of what it is nowadays, but especially back then, guys were getting paid a little bit better than that. But as Scottie Pippen admitted in the documentary, he took the length of the contract because he wasn't so sure about his health and longevity and all kinds of other ramifications that you have to take into account when you sign a contract like that. And it's been shown in the documentary that Jerry Reinsdorf was basically telling Scottie, "You sure you're going to sign this? No guarantees about getting more money after the fact. And he warned him. He said, if you try to renege, I'm not talking about it. We're done. The contract's signed. It also dives into episode 2 here, The Last Dance, with MJ and his competitiveness. Now, a lot of it can be taken many ways. Is this good in terms of building team camaraderie and things of that nature? Well, yes and no, because if you're looking to be a best friend or have friends in a competitive league, playing a game of any, if it's basketball, baseball, football, hockey, whatever you have it, soccer even, you're going to have a lot of competitiveness out there. And really the goal of Jordan in the entire time he played is win. You got to win. And that was part of his competitiveness. He wanted to win everything, not just if he was playing basketball, if it was golf, it was anything else. He wanted to win. Did he want to rub it in your face too? Probably. But regardless, I mean, the competitiveness, I totally respect it. And that's what's so good about watching this happen all these years later, is that that's what we all should be striving for. We want to win, whatever it is that we're looking at. If it's going to be a pro sport, if it's your job situation, you want to get better at what you're doing, or you want to find something better than what you currently are at. The competitiveness, something that is to be admired. Now, I should say also in this documentary, it wasn't just about the past with Michael Jordan. It was also focusing on the 1997-1998 team of the Chicago Bulls. Unprecedented access for its time, looking at the footage of how the season was progressing. They'd show little bits of what's happening during the 97-98 season with the Chicago Bulls. They also focused on a little bit on the All-Star break, Jordan being at the All-Star game, what was looked at as probably going to be his last All-Star game at the time. A lot of different storylines going on with that, but I'm focusing on the bullet points when it comes to what really stood out to me in each episode. So again, mostly it's focused on 97-98 throughout all 10 episodes, but the bullet points in each one is what I'm getting at here with my review. In episode 3, Dennis Rodman comes to the Chicago Bulls. Now, if you don't know who Dennis Rodman is, you probably recognize him from the crazy hairstyles, the piercings, the just lackadaisical attitude with a lot of things, the partying, the side trips, all that stuff. I mean, that's Dennis Rodman to a T, but on the basketball court, Dennis Rodman is probably one of the best defensive players of all time. He's got to be in the top 5. If you're going to talk about all-time defense for the NBA, he's in that list. Dennis Rodman, of course, was also part of that Bad Boys team, which caused a lot of problems, as we all know, with the Jordan rules and all the stuff with the Chicago Bulls that they weren't going to let Michael Jordan get to that next level and play or even compete for a championship. The Bad Boy Pistons, they were going to stop him at all costs. It definitely goes into pretty good detail about it in episode 3. And, hey, brings back a level of nostalgia when it comes to seeing how teams played defense. Not so much the fouling and the hard fouling. Some of it was pretty cheap, some Bush League stuff there, but defense was played nonetheless in that great era of basketball. Episode 4 focused also on Phil Jackson and his arrival to the Chicago Bulls, first as an assistant coach and then ousting the then head coach Doug Collins for, I believe he was only there for about 2 seasons, but then Phil Jackson took over with Jerry Krause, giving it, his full endorsement at that time. But Phil coming in to coach the Chicago Bulls instituted the triangle offense of the assistant coach there for the Chicago Bulls during most of this time was Tex Winter, and that was his creation, as you will. But the triangle offense basically is what it was. It was an offense that had the shape of a triangle, but it had a lot of ball movement. The ball was never going to be staying in one spot for any given time, but of course it kind of throws a wrench into it with a guy like Michael Jordan. But what's interesting to see it unfold and how it came about with Michael Jordan and to get him behind it was that you can't do it all by yourself. You've got the pieces here. You got a great player in Scottie Pippen. You got another good player at the time in Horace Grant. This is the late 80s, early 90s version of the Chicago Bulls, before Dennis Rodman. But it was working out to perfection there, and they just had to get past a team like the Detroit Pistons and an offense like the Triangle, and having other pieces around you get involved would help you dethrone a team like the Detroit Pistons. And then all of a sudden everything clicked for Michael Jordan from that point on, when it came to Phil being there and also the instituting of the triangle offense, thus getting their first NBA championship in 1991, where they show them defeating the Los Angeles Lakers in 5 games. And a quick side note, that is the only time in the Chicago Bulls Michael Jordan era going to the NBA Finals that they defeated a team in no less than 6 games in a series. That was the first and only time they did it in 5 games for an NBA championship. Episode 5, they went down the road where they were focusing on the next title for the Chicago Bulls, where they took out the Portland Trail Blazers. And you saw how Michael Jordan basically said, I'm not letting Clyde Drexler outplay me. That was motivation for him to get that second championship. And he just destroyed the Portland Trail Blazers in that first game, where he hit, I think it was 7 3-pointers in that finals game, which was an NBA record at the time. I don't know if it's been broken since then, to be honest with you, but it probably has been with the Golden State Warriors and what they've been doing lately. But I digress. Focusing on the second title there for the Chicago Bulls, they also went down the road of the Dream Team in 1992, thus wearing the Dream Team jersey of Michael Jordan that I have for you right now. This is where it plays the same story with Isaiah Thomas, whether or not he deserved a spot in that Dream Team or not. I kind of think it's a dead horse right now. I really don't see the point in bringing that up. I mean, we can all discuss whether or not Jordan did or didn't really want him on the team. He didn't want him on the team. So did Larry Bird. So did Magic Johnson, Scottie Pippen. There's a lot of names on that Dream Team that probably weren't going to play with Isaiah Thomas. It's not just Michael Jordan. So to me, it's kind of like beating a dead horse at this point, drumming it up and trying to bring about what was the antithesis of that Dream Team and how it got put together. It also went to the other, you could say, role player for the Chicago Bulls. I kind of see Tony Kukoc as not so much a role player, but just another weapon to add to this team. So Kukoc, focusing on him playing in the 1992 Olympics for Croatia, playing up against the Dream Team twice in that Olympics, there was an animosity there between Pippen, Jordan, and Tony Kukoc, just because Jerry Krause, the GM who drafted Tony Kukoc, was just fawning over how good this kid was going to be. And he ended up being a pretty good player. Tony Kukoc, I think, is deserving of Hall of Fame consideration for what he's done playing over in Europe and playing in international competition for the Olympics. Maybe not so much for the Bulls because he just doesn't have the longevity there. But when he did get here, he's a pretty damn good player. I think Tony Kukoc is one of the most underrated players off of this entire era for the Chicago Bulls. That's just my opinion. But hey, if you disagree, leave a comment below. Like, dislike the video. Make sure you subscribe, hit that bell, all that good stuff here for 101 with Wesley Sports Guy. Make sure you go to wesleysportsguy.com as well. Episode 6, they focused on to the third title, and that was up against the Phoenix Suns. And the road to get there you had to get through at that time was going to be the New York Knicks. Now, the New York Knicks were a stacked team at that time. It was a fun time to watch Michael Jordan go through all these different opponents in the NBA Finals in the Western Conference, or mainly in the East. And that's where the battles really got heated in some instances, especially with the Knicks at this time in the early 90s. You had Pat Riley as your head coach. Patrick Ewing was a star. John Starks was a good player. Charles Oakley was there. It's Anthony Mason, another guy I'm forgetting from the New York Knicks there. But good battles, good matchups, great basketball to watch. It's just amazing to see and reminisce about those days and how the game was played. And then in 93, quick side note, whether or not it was live or not, I was overseas. It probably wasn't live. But I remember the last day of school, teacher put on Game 6 of the NBA Finals between the Phoenix Suns and the Chicago Bulls. And I don't think it was the entire game, but I saw a large chunk of the end of that game and saw John Paxson hit that game-winning three-pointer to clinch the third championship for the Chicago Bulls at this time. That was just beautiful. It's a great fond memory of my youth there, being in school the last day watching an NBA Finals game. And that's just icing on the cake for me. But again, this is focusing on something that was the epitome of his career at that time. He won 3 straight, and then you kind of get the rumblings. You get the idea that, it seems like Jordan, you can kind of see how he explains it, where he just was tired. He was done. He didn't want to keep playing anymore. And outside circumstances, unfortunately, with the murder of his father, kind of accelerated what he already had decided, that he was going to walk away from the game of basketball and then go on to play baseball, which ties into the next episode of episode 7 of this documentary, where Jordan basically says, I'm done. I'm over it. Moving on. And I think this is my favorite episode of the documentary, because it also ties into his relationship with the media. And try to imagine what Michael Jordan at this time could deal with all the social media aspects of how players promote themselves and how the media interacts with the players and the constant criticism. It'd be 24/7. I mean, it's bad enough watching how many people were, grabbing at Michael through all this footage. And in one of these episodes, if it wasn't episode 7, it was probably one of the earlier ones where he's just lying in his hotel room telling the guys with the cameras during the 97-98 season that this is my happy place right now. This is the only time I can get a moment's peace in a hotel room. It's very sad to think about that, but that's the best case for a guy like Michael Jordan to have peace and quiet at any given point in his life. And episode 7 really focuses a lot about his relationship with the media and how they, with no evidence whatsoever, tried to tie his gambling and any possible gambling debts, which no evidence of to this day. But back then, the speculation was wrought with it, to tie that with the murder of his dad, which is grossly irresponsible for any and all media that speculated about something like that. It's just unconscionable to think now. But it happened. It did. Whether or not people still believe that or not is a totally different matter. But the media relationship with Michael Jordan, that definitely, I think, had a huge impact on his decision to just walk away, be done with it. He doesn't prove anything to them. This was his motivation to win because of the competitiveness. He did it. He got 3 in a row. Magic and Bird, he said, didn't get that, so he accomplished that. And he felt he didn't improve anything else. But then they go into the baseball player aspect of it, and he was, I've seen this before with a different 30 for 30 documentary, Jordan Rides the Bus, another good one about him and his playing days with the Birmingham Barons, a Double-A team for the Chicago White Sox at the time. That was a good one and shows how Jordan was just one of the guys, and it kind of reiterates and hits home on the same stuff with that, where Jordan really worked at it. He changed his whole conditioning to be a baseball player instead of a basketball player. He was a pretty decent hitter. He was driving in over 50 runs in that first minor league season of his. And the speculation is if the baseball didn't have a strike in the 94 season, he could have made a chance to play in the majors. I don't know about that, but I mean, it's Michael Jordan. I'm willing to bet he probably would have had a chance to play in Major League Baseball at some point, given if there wasn't a strike season in baseball and if the itch wasn't there for Jordan to want to come back, which ties into episode 8, where winning is everything to him. And since baseball didn't happen, he almost played two seasons there in baseball, it was time for him to come back. And he came back. He was wearing a different number. He basically looked at it as like it's a new beginning, wearing the number 45 because that was his original number when he started playing in basketball in his high school days. But then looking at how that number then transpired into playing against the Orlando Magic in the playoffs in 1995, he threw that sucker out because of Nick Anderson saying 45 is not 23. Well, you got 23, and then the wheels started spinning again. And that offseason after 95 was pretty amazing to see because you saw Michael Jordan and that light just click. Everything footage-wise from that 95-96 season was just, this man is on a mission and he's coming for everybody that doubted him. Thus, the quest for a 4th championship against the Seattle Supersonics and Gary Payton, Sean Kemp. The Seattle team was stacked. That was not a fun team to watch because my Lakers kept losing to them, but it was a fun team to watch play. And it was nice to see Seattle finally get its recognition. And it didn't start out well in the finals against the Chicago Bulls, being that they had a 72-10 season, which, no qualms about it, that is the greatest team I've ever seen. That 96 Chicago Bulls team. 72-10, no fluke about it. That was the greatest team I've ever seen play. No doubt. And of course, 72-10 ain't nothing without that ring. That was the mantra with that regular season record for the Chicago Bulls. They got it. Sad moment to see the picture of Michael Jordan crying, holding a basketball after winning the 4th NBA championship. Did it on Father's Day. First time he won a championship without his dad present. It tugs at your heartstrings there. So it's another thing to be prepared to watch in episode 8. In episode 9, you saw the quest for the 5th title against the Utah Jazz, the first of 2 appearances against the Utah Jazz in back-to-back years. But in episode 9, they focused on the 5th one with Michael Jordan going up against Karl Malone, who at that time, motivation for that fifth title, Karl Malone won the MVP award in the regular season. So there's a not in the cap for Michael Jordan of, well, this is what he's playing for. And he even said it's not a disrespect that Karl Malone wasn't deserving of the MVP award, but just the fact that it's something to motivate Michael Jordan. And that goes back to the competitiveness, the winning. He wants to beat you. He just wants to win. Simple as that. And there's nothing complicated about it, not in my eyes. They focused on the flu game also in this series in 1997, which Jordan says it was food poisoning because of a pizza. I don't know. you hear so many stories about it, but you see that iconic picture with Jordan being helped off the court by his teammate Scottie Pippen after hitting a big shot towards the end of Game 5 in that series, and it starts to make you wonder about, well, wait a minute, why are we saying it now? Why didn't you say it then? And you let the legend go for all this time, and now you're saying it's something else. Well, you know what? The way I look at it is like, it's called the flu game. We'll leave it at that. I mean, Jordan says it's food poisoning. Jordan knows more than I do because he lived it, but I take that with a grain of salt on that one. They focused on the last role player, the most important one, at least in some eyes. I don't think he's the most important, but he's definitely an integral part of this era in the second three-peat for the Chicago Bulls, Steve Kerr, when he came over to play for the Chicago Bulls in the mid to late 90s now. But Steve Kerr hitting that huge shot in Game 6 of the 1997 NBA Finals against the Utah Jazz. If he doesn't make that shot, they probably don't win that game. They might not win Game 7, even though it is at home in Chicago at that time. But Utah they were on a mission. That was a good team. That's the thing that a lot of people miss about the Chicago Bulls and who they played. Not only getting to the NBA Finals, but who they played in the NBA Finals. They played great teams. And it would have been fun to see Jordan, if he didn't retire the first time, play up against the Houston Rockets and Hakeem Olajuwon, 94-95. I mean, it's more than likely it would have been the Chicago Bulls and the Houston Rockets in those games. I'm just throwing that out there. That's probably what was going to happen. But Steve Kerr was a huge part of that run in the late 90s for the Chicago Bulls. If he doesn't hit that shot in the Game 5 of 1997, or Game 6, that was the clinching game. If I said Game 5 earlier, I'm sorry. But Game 6, that's when Steve Kerr hit that shot and thus clinched the 5th title for the Chicago Bulls. And the last episode, it was focusing on the last title, which it comes full circle with the 97-98 season, so 1998 going for that 6th title. And they were struggling at some point in the season, mainly in the beginning because you didn't have Scottie Pippen. He was upset, Scottie being Scottie. Rodman was doing his thing also. He was kind of, wanting to take a vacation and stuff like that during the 97-98 season. But it all comes full circle where they focus on doing one thing and one thing only, and that's winning a championship. And best part about that season for me was having to now go against another contender. So you've taken out the New York Knicks, you've taken out the Orlando Magic throughout the 90s. There's been some lesser teams in the East, but nonetheless, the top of the East has been pretty stacked for the most part. But then you get the Indiana Pacers now. First time these two franchises meet in the playoffs in 1998, Eastern Conference Finals, and it goes to Game 7, of course. Pacers had Reggie Miller, they had Dale Davis, Rick Smits, Jalen Rose was on that team, Mark Jackson, Chris Mullin. I mean, the team, Indiana, I think, it was said in episode 10, really, that if any team was going to knock off the Chicago Bulls at this time, it was going to be the Indiana Pacers. That was the best team to do it. And it took them to Game 7. But Jordan and the Bulls doing their thing, they got through it, and thus they face off against the Utah Jazz in what becomes another epic series. It goes 6 games, and you think the Chicago Bulls aren't going to pull that out in Game 6. They have to play Game 7 against the Utah Jazz. If that does happen, but Michael Jordan hits what is the iconic last shot of his career. I know he played 2 more years for the Washington Wizards, but that is his last shot. In my mind, and it is also the perfect shot. You cannot get any better than that. It's just amazing. It was amazing to watch it live. You knew it was coming. You knew it was going to happen, but you still couldn't believe it because at the same time, you've seen it happen so many times. And that's the thing to put it all full circle here in this documentary is that if you haven't seen this man play, whether or not if you were actually in the stadium, in the arena, watching it on TV, whatever the case may be, if you were not able to watch it in the moment, this puts it in a great light for you. And I think, taking all of the criticism aside that Michael Jordan and a production company was involved with this, so it's kind of slanted one way in some aspects, take that out of the equation. Of course, you're never going to get a perfect, unbiased documentary nowadays. It's very, very rare. But seeing the footage, the classic footage of him playing throughout his career, including the Carolina days, it's something to behold. And I'm very happy it was done. I knew it was coming. It wasn't going to happen until June, but I'm glad that a lot of generations that hadn't seen this man play, specifically for the Chicago Bulls, if you saw him at the tail end of his career, that wasn't him. Chicago playing for the Bulls, this was Michael Jordan in a nutshell. Not everything was perfect. No man is ever perfect. Nobody is ever going to be perfect. Your life is never going to be in a, wrapped in a nice, pretty present with a bow on top. It's not going to happen. But if you want to strive to be the best at whatever you want to be in life, it doesn't have to just be sports. This is a great example to watch because this man's drive to be the best is unmatched. And I've only seen one other person come close to that, and that is Kobe Bryant. And I don't know if we're ever going to see another player get to that level of what Michael Jordan was. And Kobe Bryant was the closest one that I've ever seen get to that point. But for me, this was the top of it. And it was amazing to watch. It's not that this is the greatest sports documentary I've ever seen. Being in 10 episodes, it's very in-depth. It's a lot more in-depth than I thought it was going to be. It does a lot of time shifts and back and forth and things of that nature. But would I recommend you to watch it if you haven't? Yes, absolutely watch it. If you want to reminisce, it's great. It's fantastic. All the great footage and classic moments that you remember, it's all there for you. If you haven't been accustomed to seeing him play, this is fantastic. This is right up your alley. If you love basketball, I mean, all of it. It's just, I can't recommend it enough. It's well worth the watch. It's 10 episodes, about an hour each, so it's going to be 10 hours if you watch it in one day. Spread it out over a week, what have you. It's fantastic. I love it. And I would absolutely, watch it again. Nieces and nephews. I have two. So nieces and nephews, I definitely would love to watch it with them at some point. God willing, if I have kids of my own, they will definitely be watching it. So I can't recommend it highly enough. I mean, Michael Jordan is the epitome of striving to be the best, and he's the best example I have right now. Kobe Bryant's right there with him, but Michael Jordan, this is it. This is just fantastic. It was amazing to watch. I can't recommend it enough. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe, hit that bell to get notified when all the latest videos are posted right here on the YouTube channel. Bookmark westhesportsguy.com. Use the hashtag #OneOnOneWes, and sports is coming back, folks. It's happening. Until then, I will see you next time.